Welcome to summer and another episode of Pondering the Orb. I'm your host, the wandering fantasy author Jay Reckward. Please like and subscribe, and let's get our way onto the adventure. Released in 1995, Garth Nix's Sabriel kicked off the Old Kingdom series and spawned multiple novels and a worldwide fandom. Helmed by great heroes, a wonderful bell-based necromantic magic system that just sounds as cool as I described it, and bullet-type world-building, this is a must for YA and adult fantasy readers alike. Plus, there's a fluffy white cat. So let's ring the necromancer's bells and keep a careful eye on Mogget as we read from Sabriel by Garth Nix. Sabriel by Garth Nix. The Old Kingdom series. Book 1. Prologue. It was little more than 3 miles from the wall into the Old Kingdom, but that was enough. Noonday sunshine could be seen on the other side of the wall in Enselstiri, and not a cloud in sight. Here there was a clouded sunset, and a steady rain had just begun to fall, coming fast and the tents could be raised. The midwife shrugged her cloak higher up against her neck and bent over the woman again, raindrops spilling from her nose onto the upturned face below. The midwife's breath blew out in a cloud of white, but there was no answering billow of air from her patient. The midwife sighed and slowly straightened up, that signal moving, telling the watchers everything they needed to know. The woman who had staggered into their forest camp was dead, only holding on to life long enough to pass it on to the baby at her side. But even as the midwife picked up the pathetically small form beside the dead woman, it shuddered with its wrappings, and was still. "The child, too?" asked one of the watchers, a man who wore the mask of the charter fresh drawn in wood ash upon his brow. "Then there shall be no need for baptism." His hand went up to brush the mark from his forehead, then suddenly stopped, as a pale white hand gripped his and forced it down in a single swift motion. "Peace," said a calm voice. "I wish you no harm." The white hand released its grip, and the speaker stepped into the firelight. The others watched him without welcome, and the hands that half-sketched charter marks or gone to bowstrings and hilts did not relax. The man strode towards the bodies and looked upon them. Then he turned to face the watchers, pushing his hood back to reveal the face of someone who had taken paths far from sunlight, for his skin was deathly white. "I am called a Freysson," he said, and his words sent ripplings through the people about him, as if he had cast a large and weighty stone into a pool of stagnant water. "And there will be a baptism tonight." The charter mage looked down on the bundle in the midwife's hands and said, "The child is dead, a Freysson. We are travelers. Our life lived under the sky, and it is often harsh. We know death, Lord." "Not as I do," replied a Freysson, smiling so his paper-white face crinkled at the corners and drew back from his equally white teeth. "And I say that the child is not dead yet." The man tried to meet a Freysson's gaze, but faltered and looked away at his fellows. None moved, or made any sign, till a woman said, "So, it is easily done. Sign the charter, Ernil. We will make a new camp at Leovi's Ford. Join us when you are finished here." The charter mage inclined his head in assent, and the others drifted away to pack up their half-made camp, slow with reluctance of having to move, but filled with a greater reluctance to remain near a Freysson, for his name was one of secrets and unspoken fears. When the midwife went to lay the child down and leave, a Freysson spoke. "Wait. You will be needed." The midwife looked down on the baby, and saw that it was a girl child, and save for its stillness, could be merely sleeping. She had heard of a Freysson, and if the girl could live. Rarely she picked up the child again, and held her out to the charter mage. "If the charter does not," began the man, but a Freysson held up a pallid hand and interrupted. "Let's see what the charter wills." The man looked at the child again and sighed. Then he took a small bottle from his pouch and held it aloft, crying out a chant that was the beginning of a charter, one that listed all things that lived or grew, or once lived, or would live again, and the bonds that held them all together. As he spoke, a light came to the bottle, pulsing with the rhythm of the chant. Then the chanter was silent. He touched the bottle to the earth, and then to the sign of wood ash on his forehead, and then upended it over the child. A great flash lit the surrounding woods as the glowing liquid splashed over the child's head, and the priest cried, "By the charter that binds all things, we name thee." Normally the parents of the child would then speak the name. Here, only a person spoke, and he said, "Sabriel." As he uttered the word, the wood ash disappeared from the priest's forehead and slowly formed on the child's. The charter had accepted the baptism. But she is dead!" exclaimed the charter mage, gingerly touching his forehead to make sure the ash was truly gone. He got no answer, for the midwife was staring across the fire at Oporson, and Oporson was staring at nothing. His eyes reflected the dancing flames, but did not see them. Slowly, a chill mist began to rise from his body, spreading toward the man and the midwife, who scuttled to the other side of the fire, wanting to get away, but now too afraid to run. He could hear the child crying, which was good. If she had gone beyond the first gateway, he could not have brought her back without more stringent preparations and a subsequent dilution of her spirit. The current was strong, but he knew this branch of the river and waded past pools and eddies that hoped to drag him under. Already he could feel the waters leaching his spirit, but his will was strong, so they took only the color, not the substance. He paused to listen, and hearing the crying diminish, hastened forward. Perhaps she was already at the gateway, and about to pass. The first gate was a veil of mist, with a single dark opening, where the river poured into the silence beyond. A person hurried towards it, then stopped. The baby had not yet passed through, but only because something had caught her and picked her up. Standing there, looming out of the black waters, was a shadow darker than the gate. It was several feet higher than a person, and there were pale marsh lights burning where you could expect to see eyes, and the fetid stench of carrion rolled off of it. A warm stench that relieved the chill of the river. A person advanced on the thing slowly, watching the child it held closely in the crook of a shadowed arm. The baby was asleep, but restless, and it squirmed toward the creature, seeking a mother's breast, but only held her away from itself, as if the child were hot or caustic. Slowly, Aporson drew a small silver handbell from the bandolier of bells across his chest and cocked his wrist to ring it. But the shadow thing held the baby up and spoke in a dry, slithery voice, like a snake on gravel. "Spirit of your spirit, Aporson, you can't spell me while I hold her, and perhaps I shall take her beyond the gate, as her mother has already gone." Aporson frowned in recognition and replaced the bell. "You have a new shape, Caragor, and you are now on this side of the first gate. Who was foolish enough to assist you so far?" Caragor smiled widely, and Aporson caught a glimpse of fires burning deep inside his mouth. "Oh, one of the usual things," he croaked, but unskilled. He didn't realize it would be in the nature of the exchange. Alas, his life was not sufficient for me to pass the last portal, but now you have come to help me. "I, who chained you beyond the seventh gate?" "Yes," whispered Caragor. "The irony does not, I think, escape you. But if you want the child—" He made as if to throw the baby into the stream, and with that jerk, woke her. Immediately she began to cry, and her little fist reached out to gather up the shadow stuff of Caragor like the folds of a robe. He cried out, tried to detach her, but the tiny hands held tightly, and he was forced to overuse his strength, and threw her away from him. She landed, squalling, and was instantly caught up in the flow of the river, but Aporson lunged forward, snatching her from both river and Caragor's grasping hands. Stepping back, he drew the silver bell one-handed, and swung it so it sounded twice. The sound was curiously muffled, but true, and the clear chime hung in the air, fresh and cutting, alive. Caragor flinched at the sound, and fell backwards to the darkness that was the gate. "Some fool will soon bring me back, and then," he cried out, as the river took him under. The waters swirled and gurgled, and then resumed their steady flow. Aporson stared at the gate for a time, then sighed, and placing the bell back in his belt, looked at the baby he held in his arm. She stared back at him, dark eyes matching his own. Already the color had been drained from her skin. Nervously, Abhorsen laid a hand across the brand on her forehead and felt the glow of her spirit within. The charter mark had kept her life contained when the river should have drained it. It was her life spirit that had so burned Caragor. She smiled up at him and gurgled a little, and Abhorsen felt a smile tilting the corners of his own mouth. Still smiling, he turned and began the long wade back up the river to the gate that would return them both to their living flesh. One of the best parts of our journey is that we get to go all over the world in search of great fantasy fiction, and now our journey takes us north to Iceland. Bringing us a tale of a hero in the midst of a ruinous siege, Ella Freysson hits all the right notes and more in this wonderful book to kick off a great sword and sorcery series called The Barbarian's Blade. If you're a fan of Howard and Gemmell, this series is for you. Reading from The Fall of the Grey Fortress, this is by Ella Freysson. The Fall of the Grey Fortress, The Barbarian's Blade, Book 1, by Ella Freysson. 1. We are about to be ambushed. Every man stopped roaring at Videric's words. I saw movement in the trees, he went on, and gestured subtly to the riverbank on the right. A furtive figure, heading down the river. A scout, I would think. The men, 19 besides him, had the sense not to get loud or otherwise obvious about having been alerted. Their shields were all hung on the outside of the gunwale, providing decent cover against the sudden flight of arrows, and their weapons were, of course, within reach. Ovati men, Braga said. His graying hair marked him as the oldest man on board, and his scars marked him as a respectable leader. We are near enough to their lands. They like bows, one of the men pointed out. I do, Braga agreed. Everyone had stripped to the waist, in case of someone falling overboard, and the man's fingers drifted to a small, nasty mark on his shoulder that looked like an arrow scar. Well, we only have 2 bows ourselves, Sigeric said. He scratched his scraggly beard. Let us make a landing in advance with shields up, and spring a surprise of our own. Videric turned to him and smiled. Always practical and to the point, cousin. He looked back into the forest, into the gloom where he glimpsed the figures. He felt a hunger. That familiar old fire within him had tasted fuel, and it was coming to life. And you are about to suggest something more memorable, are you not, Videric? Sigeric replied with an amused exasperation. Videric didn't look his way. His eyes traveled slowly along the tree line and the river to the clash that seemed to be coming. Boy, Braga said. Now Videric did shift his gaze, and bristled a bit. But Braga had age, and through his mother, distant kinship, to get away with such language. Think of your comrades before yourself, the man told him. Oh, I do, Videric told him, although the fire kept on building. Where do you think they will strike, O River King? It was Braga's version of a laugh. Upriver of the old village, he then replied, and several other seasoned men nodded in agreement. There is a slope on the right-hand bank that will give their archers a fine angle down onto the boat. The river is also quite calm there. Is that a good landing spot as well? Videric asked. It is, Braga told him, while giving him a knowing, piercing look. Then my course is set, says I. Videric pulled his oar fully inside, then went into his weapons. He disregarded the sword, and instead picked up his long-handed, broad-headed axe. Hear me, all of you! He gripped the handle tightly with both hands. I will leap ashore and rush ahead. By the time the boat nears the ambush spot, I will be hiding near their group. Before they can loose, I shall burst out, screaming and swinging. No one will think to shoot upon a boat while an axe is coming at their face. Meanwhile, you men shall be ready to make a landing and spring from the boat, shields and axes at the ready. We shall not just escape on this day, but have a victory. They still knew better than to be loud, but he got several approving looks and grins. You are a glory seeker, Videric, Braga said. Those are always dangerous. It seems to me that most of the danger here will be mine own, he retorted. And we are all on our way to seek glory and treasure, are we not? Now, are we in agreement, or shall we waste more time? Go, son of Honolf, Braga told him. Your life is your own, and so is your fate. I make my own fate. The boat was narrow enough to be a bit tippy, so he stood up and put his foot on the stern rather than the rail. "You should bring a shield," Unamon told him. "The future will decide what I should have done," Videric told him. "Well, we shall see how many arrows that big chest of yours can absorb," the man replied wryly. "Ha! I will make do with my wits." "Look!" one of the others suddenly exclaimed. He was pointing at the right-hand bank. A big, dark, shaggy form passed on 4 legs, then another one. Wolves. The great wolves of the deep forest. "Beasts of the Warfather," another man said, with some amount of awe. "They know what is coming." "Well, let us not disappoint them," Sigeric said. He turned to Videric. "Or anger them," he added pointedly. Videric showed him a savage grin. "I promise nothing, save that they shall have their blood in carrion." One of the most revered and story bands in the Swedish melodeath scene, Scar Symmetry has endured industry shifts, lineup changes, and more to forge some of the best albums this genre has produced in the modern era. And we're lucky to be playing a classic. This is Morphogenesis by the amazing Scar Symmetry. he's back. After a slew of collaborations and remixes of some of his finest tracks, Casper returns with a new album out tomorrow on June 12th. Playing the track Sand Waves from the upcoming album Distance, welcome to the next adventure of the Sorcerer Supreme of Synth, Caspero. Thank you so much for joining me. Remember to like and subscribe, and check out all the links to the books and music below. Safe journeys.